Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching me play Baldur's Gate 3. Specifically, this is my class guides series. Today I'm going to go over both the light and trickery domain of the Cleric. If you are interested in the life domain, I have a video of that up already, which I will link in the top right just here. But before we begin, if you find yourself liking this video, please leave it a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. But with that out of the way, let us begin. First off, with the light domain Cleric. First thing, I'm going to go over both of the features you get for both of these Cleric subclasses. The reason that I am doing both of these in one video is because, as far as I'm concerned, the way you build them is pretty much the same. The reason I did life differently in a different video is because life domain I'd build generally a bit differently to how I would build a light domain or a trickery domain. But let's go with light domain. The light domain is offered by deities of justice, majesty, and primordial flame, providing spells that dispel darkness and harm the undead. Once again, deity choice doesn't make a whole lot of difference mechanically. It changes some stuff that happens in game with dialogue choices and things like that, but overall it doesn't actually affect your cleric whatsoever. So you can have any deity you wish. I'm on Selûne because that's the default. As far as cantrips, you have 4 choices with the Cleric of Light. You have Guidance, Resistance, Sacred Flame, and Thaumaturgy. Ordinarily, clerics get a choice of 1 extra, which is the Light spell, but if you look down here, we actually get Light always as a Light Cleric, which somewhat makes sense. So you don't have to choose that, you just get that for free. But out of these ones, Guidance will give you a D4 bonus on ability checks of your choice. It's a good idea to cast this all the time, and just have it up as much as possible. Next is Resistance. You can bolster a creature's defenses. It receives a D4 bonus to all its saving throws, so it's more likely to be able to resist most spells. Sacred Flame is a damaging cantrip. It does 1d8 radiant, and it's just a dexterity saving throw. And Thaumaturgy will give you advantage on intimidation and performance checks. With that out of the way, we can look at the actual class features you get. You get spell slots. You get 2 level 1 spell slots. You have proficiency in your wisdom saving throw, as well as your charisma saving throw. You have light armor proficiency, medium armor proficiency, and shield proficiency, as well as proficiency with all simple weapons. You notice here you do not have heavy armor proficiency. This is the main difference between the life cleric and the other clerics, is that the life cleric gets heavy armor proficiency. So I generally say, okay, wear heavy armor because you can. The others, not so much. As for the spells that you get, we can go into the subclass here. You get Warding Flare. Shield yourself with a Divine Light. Use your reaction to impose disadvantage on an attacker, potentially causing their attack to miss. So essentially, once per turn, you can give an attacking enemy disadvantage. And we get the domain spells, so there are spells that you gain, and they're always prepared. For the light domain, that is Burning Hands, which is a fire spell. Does 3d6 fire damage. And you have Fairy Fire. What this does, it will coat an area in kind of little dust, like a glowing dust. This gives you advantage to hit anything that is glowing. Additionally, if there is an invisible character, it will make them visible. They don't get any benefit for being invisible because they get coated in this weird little fairy dust that allows you to see them. And you still have advantage on the attacks, so it's very, very useful if you have invisible opponents, and it's also just generally useful because advantage is always good, so if you can give yourself advantage, fantastic. As I said, you always have light prepared, you just get that straight away. Also, you get Bless and Cure Wounds here as well, as all clerics do. Looking through the spell list, you get Bane, Command, Halt, Create Water, Guiding Bolt, Healing Word, Inflict Wounds, Protection from Evil and Good, Shield of Faith, Bless, and Cure Wounds. So going through here, Bane gives a default penalty to attack rolls and saving throws. Halt makes people stop, they can't move, and they can't take actions. Create Water, relatively self-explanatory, you can create water. Guiding Bolt is a basic radiant damage attack, so it does 4d6 radiant damage. It is a ranged attack spell. Healing Word is a ranged heal. It does 1d4 plus your wisdom modifier of healing. Inflict Wounds is a melee spell that does 3d10 necrotic damage. Protection from Good and Evil, or from Evil and Good. Protect a creature against aberrations, celestials, elementals, fiends, and fae, and undead. Which means you can't be charmed, frightened, or possessed by any of these creature types. When they do it, well, you can be, but when they do it, when they attempt it, they do so at disadvantage. Next we have Shield of Faith. This increases your AC by 2. In fact, it increases the AC by 2 of anybody. You can cast this on anybody. It is a concentration spell, however. Bless is the opposite of Bane, so rather than giving your enemies a d4 penalty, you give yourself a d4 bonus. And then Cure Wounds is a better heal spell than Healing Word, but you have to touch the creature to do it, you can't do it at a distance. So that's everything for the Light Domain Cleric. If we then go over to the Trickery Domain, a domain shared by wicked, chaotic, and mischievous deities alike, those who channel Trickery specialize in deception and illusion magic. Cantrips, exactly the same, except you don't get light for free, so you have to choose light if you want it, but otherwise the cantrips are the same. If we go down here, these are all the same, this is just cleric stuff. Your subclass features though, the spells that you get are Charm Person, so you can magically charm a humanoid you can see, so they won't attack you, they'll be on your side, effectively, until the effect wears off, or they save from the effect. And you can cast Disguise Self, so you can make yourself look like something else. Just a magical illusion around you that makes you look like someone else. You can look like a different race, you can look like a different gender, whatever you want. You also get Blessing of the Trickster as an action. So, you grant another creature advantage on stealth checks. This requires concentration, but you can just make... You can just make another creature better at stealth. It's quite useful. And as with all clerics, you get Bless and Cure Wounds. So going up at Prepare Spells, all of these are exactly the same. We don't need to go over them again. Exactly the same. That makes no difference whether or not you are a Trickster Cleric, or whether you are a Light Cleric, they get the same. Moving on now to the race choice. The race choice here is exactly the same as what I said with the Life Cleric. You pretty much want something that gives you a boost into Wisdom. I tend to prefer Half-Elf, just because you can put that into anything. And specifically with this, I put it into Wisdom and Dexterity, and you get this Charisma boost, which is quite useful. Having additional Charisma is always good in a video game context like this, where your main character is likely going to be doing a lot of talking. Other good choices, you could do a Gold Dwarf, because they get +1 into Wisdom, and +2 into Constitution. Human, always good for pretty much anything, because they get +1 into everything. But those are the main ones. I would say Half-Elf is likely going to be your best choice here. But with that, we can move on to the ability scores. You'll notice here I have 8 in Strength. You start out with a mace, which is a strength weapon. I would change this relatively quickly to a short sword or a dagger. Or a scimitar, perhaps. Something that is a finesse weapon and uses dexterity. The reason I would suggest doing this is because you don't have heavy armor proficiency, you're likely going to be using either medium armor or light armor. If you are using medium armor, you don't need to go to 16. 14 is probably going to do, because most of the time, medium armor only lets you add +2 from your dexterity anyway. However, I would suggest wearing light armor, and actually going to 16 here to give yourself a +3 from your dexterity into your armor class. Again, there's an argument for this, 10 strength and 14 dex, and then wearing medium armor. That's perfectly okay. But I would tend to go like this, and then just use a dexterity-based weapon. So you can shoot with a bow, you can use... You can shoot with a bow very well, because you have a +3 with your dexterity to hit. You can also use a short sword or a dagger or something, so that your melee weapon is also using your dexterity. 14 constitution here, you want to be relatively bulky. I tend to like my clerics to be relatively bulky. 10 intelligence, 10 charisma. I don't like having these negative, just because of the chance to fail social interactions. And then wisdom, obviously, is the spellcasting for clerics, so we need this to be pretty high at 16. So this is the spread I would suggest for both different subclasses. Both Trickery and Light Domain, I would say both go with this pretty well. Obviously, if you want to use strength weapons, you can lower down your dexterity quite a bit, and up your... And up your strength a bit. I just don't think that's optimal. I think optimally you would actually tank your strength and then just go all into dexterity. There we go. I just think this is a better build overall. But now we can go over the level ups. Alright everybody, so we're back and we have our first level up. Luckily, I can do both of this in one run because Shadowheart is a Trickery Domain Cleric. So I can actually show you both of them in the same run, which is nice. If we go to Tav, which is... I don't know why this is the default name, but it is. So all my characters are named Tav when I'm doing these for some reason. But we level up. First thing we get is we get spell slots. We get one more level 1 spell slot. We also get Channel Divinity, 1 charge. We get Turn Undead, like all of them. All clerics get Turn Undead when they first reach this level. We can now have an extra spell we can learn, which is useful, I suppose. I guess I'll go Shield of Faith, why not? And for our subclass, we get Radiance of the Dawn. Harness the sun's divine power to dispel any magical darkness and deal 2d10 plus 1 radiant damage to hostile creatures. This is a Constitution saving throw. And you can see down the bottom here, on a successful saving throw, creatures only take half damage. It doesn't affect creatures that have total cover from you. So essentially this is like a boom burst of light coming from you. It's really cool, and you can see here it uses our Channel Divinity option. So we only have one charge of Channel Divinity, so we can either do this or we can turn undead. As we level up, we'll get more of these charges. But that's pretty much it for leveling up. You don't get a whole lot for leveling up with Clerics, but Radiance of the Dawn. And then if we go to Shadowheart, who is a Trickery domain, she gets the same thing here. Turn undead, Channel Divinity, she gets the same boost to her prepared spells. I think I'm actually going to give her Inflict Wounds, because why not? But her Channel Divinity is Invoke Duplicity. Summon an illusion to distract your enemies. You and your allies receive advantage on attack rolls against a creature if both the attacker and the illusion are within 10 feet of it. So essentially you can put this down next to enemies, and then whenever you do a melee attack on that enemy, you have advantage. So it's quite useful. The one thing I will note about this is currently in the game, Invoke Duplicity is a bit broken. For instance, the actual illusion you create is like a little scarecrow attack dummy type thing. It's supposed to be a copy of yourself, so that's not implemented correctly yet. Also, you're supposed to be able to move it with a bonus action on your turn, which I don't think is working yet. So there's a few glitches with it, but for the most part, it still does the bonus of giving you advantage, which is nice. But the idea being that it distracts your enemies. But that's what you get for Trickery Domain. Okay, on to level 3. Okay, so going up to level 3, you get an increase in hit points, like you always do. This is the Cleric of Light. You get one more level 1 spell slot. You get 2 level 2 spell slots. You also get a bunch of second level spells that you have access to, notably Blindness, Hold Person, Prayer of Healing, and Silence. But for the Light Domain specifically, you also get Dark Vision spell, so you can cast this to make someone be able to see in the dark. Relatively useful for a couple of humans in the party, actually. Scorching Ray, this is a fire spell. Light Domain gets quite a few fire spells as they level up, which is quite useful. And you get Aid and Lesser Restoration. I also get some stuff here because I'm half drow, but that's irrelevant. It's actually literally irrelevant now because I already have Fairy Fire, so this does nothing for me. But these are the things you get for your subclass. Moving on now to the Trickery Domain. Alright, so with the Trickery Domain Cleric, you can see here we've got Shadowheart. Once again, more hit points. Same amount of spell slots unlocked, same spells for just the general Cleric spells, but if we go down to the Trickery Domain specifically, you get Mirror Image, which allows you to duplicate yourself so that there's a bunch of shimmering images of you surrounding you. Really quite a cool spell. And we get Pass Without a Trace, which will give you a +10 to your stealth checks for all the people in your party, as long as they stay close enough to her. That means stealthing is about 100 times easier if you have Pass Without a Trace up, to be perfectly honest, and Aid and Lesser Restoration she gets as well. So you can remove a disease with Lesser Restoration. Aid gives all of your party members an additional 5 HP. It also heals them as well, which is nice, but the 5 HP is what you want it for. Alright, that's it for level 3. Next up, we can go over some of the feats that you get at level 4. Alright everyone, so for the level 4 level up, you get a feat. I'm just going to go over the feats that I would suggest you pick up for these subdomains for Cleric. First of all, is the obvious one, is ability score improvement. You can increase any score you wish by 2 points, or any combination by 1 point. This is always a good choice for pretty much every time you get a feat option. However, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best choice. Shieldmaster, much like with my previous Life Domain Cleric, Shieldmaster is a very good feat, particularly if you're wielding a shield. Well, I suppose only if you're wielding a shield, but if you are wielding a shield, it's a very good one to take. So you gain a +2 bonus to dexterity saving throws when wielding a shield, and if a spell forces you to make a dexterity saving throw, you can use your reaction to shield yourself, so you take no damage rather than half damage. Very, very useful. Again, probably not so useful in the early access, but I can see it being very useful going forward after the game gets fully released. Next we have Tough, so you increase your hit points by 2 for each level, so that's at level 4 an additional 8 hit points. More hit points is always good, with any class, under any scenario. Next we have Heavily Armoured. So, if you decided that you don't want to bump your dexterity too high, and you instead want to go strength, you can do that. I would just suggest picking up this feat. That way that you can get yourself some heavy armor. Shadowheart, for instance, I would say always grab this feat, because Shadowheart only has 9 dexterity. So she's really built as a strength cleric, but having 9 dexterity means she has a very, very low armor class, so you need to get her in heavy armor, is my opinion. But because they don't get heavy armor proficiency by default, you have to actually use this feat to be able to get yourself proficiency in that armor. I would say it's definitely worth it for Shadowheart, however. And if you build similarly to Shadowheart. Next up we have Defensive Duelist. When you're attacked with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to increase your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss. It's worth noting that the Light Domain Cleric actually has this kind of inbuilt. This is mainly for the Trickery domain, I would suggest this. Because the Light Domain has this inbuilt. It's got one of its features is to do exactly this effect. Only you do it with like a flash of light rather than doing it by increasing your armor class. Alright, finally, this is my actual suggestion for the specific build that I've shown you with the very high dexterity, where you increase your strength or dexterity score by 1, dexterity probably is where I would go here, to a maximum of 20, and then you gain proficiency with 4 weapons of your choice, and then I would suggest you get a good finesse weapon, something like a rapier, and just pick the proficiencies that you like with a weapon that you want to use, and get a proficient finesse weapon, so something that you can use your dexterity for. Because we're really pumping dexterity as much as possible on this build, and kind of foregoing strength, which is really, really useful if you use Weapon Master. But that's it for the feat choice, so moving on. Alright, so we're back for the equipment phase. First thing, exactly the same as my previous Cleric build, the 2 early items I think you should probably get are the Whispering Promise, which is a ring that will bless anybody you heal, and the Hellrider's Pride, which will give Blade Ward to anybody you heal. The Hellrider's Pride you get by buying off Zevlor, who you can find in the Druid Grove, and the Whispering Promise can be bought off Novice Grat, this guy over here, in the Goblin Camp. He's like just on the right as you walk into the Goblin Camp. You will have to probably reset the day a few times to actually get him to sell it, because it's relatively rare whether or not he sells it or not. But it is a randomized thing whenever you reset the day and go to a new day, so you can continuously stand next to him and just spam reset the day until you get what you need. As far as armor, that's not what I wanted to push. I'm actually wearing the Githyanki half-plate. I just stole this off Lysel. If, however, you want Lysel in your party, there is another 15 AC medium armor you can get. Unfortunately, it's very expensive. You can buy it from, there is, in the Druid Grove, well, not technically in the Druid Grove, just here on the map, there is a blacksmith, and that blacksmith will sell you a +1 scale mail, which is 15 AC, so it's the same as Lysel's plate, but it is very, very expensive. You're talking like nearly 2,000 gold for it, which is certainly up there. It's much easier just to take Lysel's armor. But that would be my suggestion if you're going for medium armor. There we go. Also worth noting, I'm using a bow here. Most of my attacks I use the bow, or the dagger. The reason being is I have a very high dexterity. Also worth noting that not really implemented in current early access, but later on when there's more stuff we can do, I'm sure particularly after we actually make it to Baldur's Gate, you'll be able to buy light armor that will end up giving you a higher AC than this Githyanki half-plate. Because you can get light armors that have a 14 AC on base, so we'll have 14 plus, by the time we get there, we'll have +4 on our strength. So we'll be up there in AC. Also, we have a shield. I like carrying a shield because that puts our AC to 19, so we are very hard to hit. Also, you combine that with Shield of Faith, you have a 21 AC. Very, very difficult to hit, so you can tank very, very well. But essentially the way I play this is that I tank and then shoot people with the bow and use my spells how I need to use them. But that's pretty much all there is for early game loot. I won't go, as I said, in this series I'm not going to go into like sort of the be-all end-all end game loot that you can get for these characters in early access. One, because most of the time to actually explain how to get it ends up being rather spoilery. And secondly, honestly, by the time you get to the point where you can get this stuff, which is relatively early, there isn't like amazing gear that you're going to get that's just going to make a build or break a build. Chances are, like, you can go in with nothing, really. I mean, it's mainly the spells and your level that's going to determine how good you are. The gear is just a side bonus. And it's just, I'm putting it in here just for kind of suggestion purposes. But anyway, that is it for both the Trickery domain and the Light domain Cleric. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.